My name is Delphine Cross. I'm 38 years old, and I jump out of airplanes into wildfires for a living. At my mother-in-law's 70th birthday, she raised her glass in front of 40 guests, looked right at me, and said, "And this is Marcus's wife, the girl who plays with dogs in the dirt. We don't let her cook." The room laughed. My sister-in-law added, "Careful, the mutt might shed on the good china." They made me eat on the back porch, alone. What none of them knew was that 1 year earlier, when the Ridgeline fire nearly swallowed this whole town, my dog and I pulled a trapped boy out of the flames. I never told a soul his name. 40 minutes into that party, someone turned on the TV for background noise, and the local news began replaying the fire. By the time the segment ended, nobody in that room was laughing anymore. There's a particular quiet you learn on a fire line. Not the absence of sound. The wind and the crown fire roar, and the radio static are always there, but the quiet inside your own chest, where you make the decisions that keep people alive. I've made a career out of that quiet. My name is Delphine Cross. For 11 years I've packed my chute, checked my Pulaski, and stepped out of a twin otter at 9,000 feet into places most people spend their lives running away from. The dog changed everything. Juno came to me at 8 weeks old, a Belgian Malinois with one ear that never quite stood up. I trained her for search and rescue for 2 years before she found her first live person under a collapsed deck. She's 6 now. She can smell a human being through 4 feet of rubble and tell me, with one look, whether that person is still breathing. We are a two-body team. I don't work without her. I never talk about any of it. Not at dinner parties, not with the neighbors. When people ask what I do, I say, I work with dogs. It's true enough. I learned early that the moment you tell someone you jump into fire, the conversation stops being a conversation and becomes an interview. And there's another reason, one I kept even from Marcus for a long time, but that reason belongs later in this story on a night with the television on. I've been married to Marcus Whitmore for 6 years. He's a civil engineer, gentle, careful, the kind of man who reads the instruction manual all the way through. I love him. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest, because the rest does not make his family look good. His mother is Eleanor. His sister is Bianca. In the Whitmore house there is one currency, and it is respectability. Bianca is a senior manager at a regional bank. She wears the word manager like a brooch. Eleanor has repeated the phrase, "Our Bianca," at the bank so many times over 6 years that I could set it to music. Me, they never quite figured out how to file. The first Thanksgiving, Eleanor asked what I did, and when I gave my usual answer, I work with dogs, she smiled the way you smile at a child who's told you they want to be a mermaid. How sweet, she said. So, you're between things. I was, at that moment, 4 days off a fire in Idaho that had burned 11,000 acres. I said, something like that. Marcus squeezed my knee under the table and said nothing. That became the pattern. To them, I was the girl who plays with dogs. Bianca called it once, unemployment with a leash. Eleanor once asked me, in front of guests, to please not sit on the good sofa, in case of the smell. There was no smell. Juno is cleaner than most of their friends. But I learned to sit where I was told, to eat what I was given, to smile, and let it slide off me the way rain slides off a treated jacket. I told myself it was for Marcus. That keeping the peace in his family was a gift I could give him. I'm not sure now that it was a gift to anyone. Here is the thing I never once said at those dinners. Last summer, when the Ridgeline fire came down out of the hills and got within 2 miles of this very town, Juno and I were on the crew that jumped it. We pulled people out. One of them was a boy. I have never told a single member of my husband's family about that day, or about who I carried out of the smoke. I had my reasons. You'll understand them. Just not yet. So when the invitation came, cream cardstock, gold lettering. Please join us for Eleanor's 70th. I already knew what the afternoon would be. I stood at the kitchen counter the morning of the party and read it twice. Then I set it face down and finished filling Juno's water bowl. You don't have to bring her, Marcus said behind me. He meant the dog. She goes where I go, I said. You know that. He rubbed the back of his neck. Just, you know how Mom is. Maybe today we keep a temperature low. I always keep the temperature low, Marcus. I clipped the leash to Juno's collar. She sat, tail sweeping the floor once, watching me the way she watches me before a jump, ready, patient, trusting that whatever I walked her into, I'd walk her back out of. We drove out along County Road 9, with the windows down. 40 minutes of hayfields going gold. Juno rode with her chin on the doorframe, ears full of wind, and I put my hand on her back and felt her breathing slow to match mine. I remember thinking that all I had to do was survive one afternoon. Smile through the toasts, eat what I was handed, drive home. One afternoon. The truck slowed at the turnoff. There it was, strung between two fence posts over the gravel drive, a white banner, hand-lettered in blue, Happy 70th Eleanor. I did not know, as we rolled under it, that inside the farmhouse someone had already switched the living room television on. The screen door hadn't finished swinging shut behind me before Eleanor's voice came down the porch steps ahead of her. Not the dog. The dog stays outside. She was in cream linen, pearls the color of old teeth, her silver hair pinned up the way she wore it for church. She came down 2 steps and stopped, one hand on the rail, looking not at me, but at Juno. "There's a run by the shed," she said. "Tie it there. I won't have that filthy animal tracking mud through my house on my birthday." Juno is 6 years old. She has pulled 2 children and 1 grown man out of collapsed structures. She sat at my left heel on the gravel, ears forward, and did not so much as sniff the air. I looked at that clean linen, and I thought about the thing I never say. 11 years I have jumped out of planes into fire. I have never once told this family a number. Then I clipped the long lead to Juno's harness and walked her to the run myself. I filled the water bowl from the spigot. The gravel bit through my knees when I crouched to unclip her, and she pressed her head into my chest once, the way she does before a jump. "I'll be back," I told her. She lay down in the shade like she'd been asked to hold a search line. Inside, the farmhouse smelled of warm brie and lilies. 40 people, maybe more, glasses in hands, the long table dressed in white. Marcus found me by the door and squeezed my shoulder. "You came," he said, like there'd been a question. Bianca was holding court by the mantel in a navy blazer, telling 3 women about a merger. She saw me over their heads, and her mouth curved. "Delphine, you made it in from the woods." I said it was good to see her. It's mostly true. She's my husband's sister, and I have spent 6 years learning to say true, small things. They sat me at the far end. When the toast started, Eleanor stood, tapped her glass with a fork, and the room went soft and attentive. She thanked her guests. She thanked Bianca, my daughter, who they made vice president at 39. Applause. Then she turned the glass toward my end of the table. "And, of course, we have Delphine," she said, warm as anything. "Marcus's wife. The girl who plays with dogs out in the dirt." A ripple of laughter, uncertain at first, then permission granted. "We don't let her in the kitchen. She'd frighten the caterers." Bigger laugh. Bianca lifted her glass an inch. "To honest work," she added, and the word honest sat there. I did not set down my fork hard. I did not stand. I looked at the champagne going flat in my glass, the small beads rising slower and slower, and I counted them until the laughter moved on to something else. Marcus stared at his plate. He did not look up. Under the table his hand found my knee, and I let it stay there, and I said nothing because saying something is how these dinners end early and badly. A caterer in a black apron came to my elbow a few minutes later, apologetic, a young man who couldn't meet my eyes. Mrs. Whitmore thought, "There's more room on the porch. For you. It's cooler out there." So I carried my plate out to the porch, to a small iron table by the rail, alone, where I could see the shed run and Juno's pale shape in the shade. The screen door muffled the party to a hum. A wasp worked the rim of my glass. I ate 3 bites of cold salmon and stopped counting things. Out past the fence, County Road 9 ran flat and empty in the heat. That's when the door opened again, careful, and a boy slipped out sideways holding a plate stacked with cake. 2 slices, both corners, the good frosting. Toby, 12 years old, all elbows, Eleanor's grandson, in a button-up someone had made him wear. He set the plate down across from me like it was a delivery he'd been trusted with. "I got you the corner pieces," he said. "Those are the best ones." I told him he didn't have to sit out here in the cold with the dog lady. "Juno's not dirty," he said, matter of fact, and pulled the other chair out. Its legs shrieked on the porch boards. He looked toward the run, and something crossed his face that was older than 12. "Can I go say hi to her? After cake?" I said she'd like that. He grinned and got frosting on his lip. I watched him and felt the first thing I'd felt all afternoon that wasn't the flat count of champagne beads. 6 years, and I could count on one hand the people in this family who'd ever pulled a chair out for me. This child had done it without being told. He talked with his mouth full, about school, about a fox he'd seen, about how his mom said dogs carry germs, but he didn't believe it. Then he went quiet, turning his fork over, and looked at me a certain way. Careful. Like he was checking a door before he opened it. "Miss Delphine," he said. "Do you remember last summer?" The screen door banged. Toby. Bianca stood in the frame, drink still in her hand, her voice pleasant, and her eyes not pleasant at all. "Inside. Now." The screen door clapped shut behind Toby, and I stood in the yard with a paper plate of untouched carrot cake, watching the shape of my sister-in-law through the kitchen window. Bianca had a hand on the boy's shoulder. Not gentle. She leaned down close to his ear, and Toby's chin dropped toward his chest the way a kid's does when he's being told something he doesn't understand but knows he is to obey. I set the plate on the porch rail. Juno lifted her head from the dirt by the run, watched me, and lay back down. 11 years of reading terrain, and I couldn't read what I'd just seen through a pane of glass. I told myself it was nothing. Kids ask too many questions at parties. Ants get short. That's all. I didn't believe me. After a while I went inside to wash my hands. The downstairs bathroom was off the back hallway, past the coat closet, and the water in that old farmhouse came out cold for a full minute before it turned. I let it run over my knuckles and looked at the dirt still under 2 of my nails, the kind that doesn't come out with a party soap shaped like a rose. That's when I heard them in the hall. "You don't bring that up again. You hear me?" Bianca's voice, low and clipped, the professional voice she used on people who owed the bank money. "Not today. Not the fire. Not last summer. None of it." "But it's true, Aunt B. She's the one who—" Toby. A pause. The floor creaked under someone's shifting weight. "I mean it." I stood very still with the water running. I didn't hear what Toby said back, only the sound of his sneakers going fast up the stairs, 2 at a time. "Not the fire. Not last summer." I turned the tap off. My reflection looked calm. My hands were not. I dried them on the little rose-scented towel and folded it back exactly the way I'd found it, corner over corner, because I am a guest in this house, and I have always left it the way I found it. Here is what I couldn't make fit. Bianca is a vice president at a bank. She has been one since she was 39, and she reminds a room of it inside 5 minutes. She has never once asked me a single question about my life. So how did she know there was anything about last summer worth silencing a 12-year-old over? I found Marcus by the drinks table, pouring club soda. He wasn't going to drink. "I need a minute," I said. He glanced toward the living room, where his mother held court in a wingback chair, then back at me. "Everything okay?" "Your sister just told Toby to stop talking about last summer." "In the hallway." "She sounded scared, Marcus." He rubbed the back of his neck. "He does that. 6 years of marriage, and I know the whole vocabulary of his hands better than the words that come out of him. Bianca gets like that. You know how she is with the kid." "That's not what I asked." "Then." He lowered his voice, stepped closer, and the fresh-cut lemon on his fingers came off him like an apology. "It's Mom's 70th. 40 people. Can you just let it be one day? Please. For me." I looked at him for a long moment. There was a wet ring spreading under his glass on the tablecloth, and neither of us moved to blot it. "Let it be," I repeated. "You know I love you." "I know you love me quietly," I said. "That's the part one keep waiting on." He didn't answer. Behind him, Eleanor laughed at something, that high hostess laugh that carries across a room, and I understood that the man I'd married would let a great deal go on burning as long as no one made him hold the hose. I went back outside. Juno stood up when I crossed the yard. I crouched in the dirt by the run, in my one good dress, and put both arms around her neck. She smelled like straw and warm dog and the outside of things, and she leaned her weight into me the way she does when a person's heart climbs too fast. Nobody trained that into her. It's just there. We could just go, I whispered into her fur. County Road 9, 40 minutes home. Dinner on the couch. Nobody would follow us out. I actually reached for my keys. That's when the MC's voice came booming through the open windows, one of Eleanor's country club friends who'd appointed himself master of ceremonies for the afternoon, tapping a fork against crystal. Folks, we're going to cut the cake in 10 minutes. A ripple of applause. And to set the mood while Eleanor gets ready for her close-up, let's have a little something on. I heard the couch cushions shift. I heard him fumble for the remote. And I heard the big television in the living room click on. The volume came up too loud at first. The party host laughed and stabbed at the remote until the sound settled into the room. A commercial for a car dealership. Then a jingle for a mattress store off County Road 9. Nobody was really watching. Forks scraped plates. Somebody was pouring coffee near the sideboard, and the smell of it drifted out to the porch, where I sat with my plate half-eaten, Juno's pale shape still out at the run. Eleanor had a long knife in her hand. Silver handle. She was holding it over the cake like she was posing for a photograph, waiting for someone to tell her to smile. Local news next, the host announced, mostly to fill the air. Let's have some background noise while Eleanor does the honors. I remember thinking I could still get out clean. 20 more minutes. Cut the cake, clap, go home. I had already texted the babysitter who watched my gear that I'd be back by 9. I had 1 foot half-turned toward the truck in my mind. Then the anchor's voice changed key. That flat, careful tone they use for anniversaries. 1 year ago this week, the Ridgeline fire came within 2 miles of town. I stopped chewing. The screen filled with orange. Not the pretty orange of a sunset, the wrong orange, the one I still see behind my eyes some nights. A ridge on fire. A wall of it. The camera shook the way news cameras shake when the person holding it is afraid. Tonight we look back at the crews who held the line, the anchor said, including one federal smoke jumper and her search dog who dropped in when the fire jumped the road. The fork left my hand. I didn't set it down. It just wasn't in my fingers anymore. 40 people in that living room, and for 1 second none of them connected the word to me. Why would they? I was the girl who plays with dogs in the dirt. I was eating on the porch. The word smoke jumper floated over their heads like it belonged to some stranger on the coast. Somebody near the window even laughed, the same tired joke I'd swallowed 100 times. 11 years of jumping out of planes, and she still can't hold a fork right. A ripple of chuckles. It died fast. Because it didn't float over Toby. He was on the floor near the couch, and he came up off it like a spring. Pointed straight at the television with his whole arm. That's her. His voice cracked right down the middle. That's Aunt Delphine. That's her and Juno. Heads turned. Not to the screen. To me. I was up too, then. I didn't decide to be. Out at the run, Juno was on her feet, ears forward, feeling it come off my body before I did. I reached for the remote on the coffee table, and the coffee table was 15 feet away, on the far side of a room full of people, and I might as well have reached for the ridge itself. Turn that off, I said. I meant it to sound calm. It came out low and fast. Somebody turn it off. Nobody moved. They were looking at the screen. They were finally, all of them, looking at the screen. That's when Bianca moved. She crossed the room quicker than I'd ever seen her move in 6 years, heels catching on the rug, one hand already out. She snatched the remote off the coffee table and jabbed it at the TV. Once. Twice. Her thumb hunting for the power button and missing it, hitting mute, hitting menu, hitting everything but the one thing she wanted. It's the news, it's nothing, she said. Too bright, too quick. Let's not, Mom, cut the cake now. And I watched her face while she did it. That's the part one keep. Her face wasn't confused. It wasn't surprised. A person who is surprised looks at the television. Bianca wasn't looking at the television at all. She was looking at her mother and then at me, and she was the color of the tablecloth. She knew. Standing there with the remote sweating in her hand, jabbing at buttons in front of 40 guests, she knew exactly what was coming next, and she had known for a long time. The screen didn't go dark. She'd hit mute, that was all, and the picture kept rolling in silence, which was somehow worse. No anchor, no crackle of fire. Just the images, one after another, in that terrible quiet.
Bianca.
Eleanor's voice thin. What are you doing? Sit down. Mom, honestly, it's... Sit down. The room had gone still in a way a room only goes still when everyone senses a thing before they understand it. The host with the coffee pot froze mid-pour. A woman near the window put her hand to her mouth for no reason she could have named. Even the little sound stopped. I could hear Juno breathing against my leg. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, that old fireline drumbeat. On the muted screen, the footage cut to something new. Body cam. That jerking, close, lurching angle I know from the inside because I have worn that camera on my own chest. A firefighter in full gear, mask fogged, moving through smoke thick as a curtain, and on that firefighter's back, arms locked around the neck, legs wrapped tight, was a boy. A boy in a green camp jacket with a yellow patch on the sleeve. Across the room, Eleanor made a small sound, and the long silver cake knife slipped out of her hand and clattered onto the good china. The body cam footage kept rolling, silent, and the whole room leaned toward it without meaning to. On the screen, a firefighter in a yellow shell reached up and pulled off the mask. Steam came off the collar. The camera bounced hard, the way a camera does when a person is running, and for 1 second the face caught the light. My face, younger by a year, streaked with soot, jaw set the way it sets when I have stopped feeling my own arms. Someone by the fireplace whispered, "Wait."
Just that.
Wait. Then Juno filled the frame. Even muted, you could read her body, nose down, tail flat, the working stance, cutting left through a wall of smoke toward a stand of pines the fire hadn't taken yet. On the news last summer they'd called it the K-9 that found the campers. They never printed her name. Her name is Juno. She is 6 years old. She does not quit on a scent, and she did not quit that day. I stood in the doorway to the porch with a paper plate still in my hand. I set it down on the sideboard. I don't remember deciding to. The screen cut to the boy. He was small in the frame, curled against my shoulder as I carried him, one arm hooked under his knees, the blue camp shirt bright against all that gray. His face was turned into my neck, but you could see the shirt. You could see the little reflective strip on the sleeve. 40 guests looked at that shirt. Then, slowly, the way a field turns when wind moves across it, 40 guests looked at the boy standing 3 feet from the television. Toby, 12 years old, in his good white shirt for his grandmother's party, and back to the screen and back to Toby. Toby's mouth was open. His eyes were shining. "That's me," he said. Not loud. He said it again, louder, pointing with his whole hand. "That's me." That's when the fire came over the hill. Delphine and Juno came down out of the plane, and Delphine carried me. That's me. Nobody moved. The news cut again. Now there was a man at a podium, gray at the temples, the fire department patch on his shoulder. The caption read Chief R. Ramirez. A woman had the remote and turned the volume back up without thinking, and his voice came into that quiet room clear as a bell. "I've run this crew 11 years, Chief Ramirez said. I've put people into places most folks will never see. That jumper went into a spot the incident commander had already written off. Against my call on the radio, I'll be honest with you. She found 5 people and a boy alive in there. She's the bravest firefighter I have ever commanded. I'd follow that dog and that woman into anything." The remote holder set the remote down very carefully on the arm of the couch, like it had gotten heavy. I want to tell you I felt vindicated. I didn't. My ears were roaring. I was doing the thing I do on a jump, the thing they train into you until it's older than fear.
Count your breath.
Find your footing. Do not look at the whole fire. Look at the next 10 feet. 4 breaths. The rug had a red border. Marcus was standing by the piano, and he had gone the color of the tablecloth. Bianca had her back against the china cabinet. She wasn't looking at the TV anymore. She was looking at Toby. There was something in her face I'd never seen on her in 6 years. Bianca, 41, vice president since 39, the daughter, who always knew exactly what her face was doing. It wasn't doing anything now. It had come loose.
Turn it off, she said.
Quiet. Then, somebody turn it off. Nobody did. Eleanor was still by the cake. The long silver knife was on the floor where it had fallen. One blue frosting rosette smeared across the toe of her shoe, and she hadn't picked it up. She was 70 years old today. She had spent the whole afternoon standing very straight, and now she reached out one hand and put it flat on the table like the floor had tilted. A glass of champagne sat by her plate. The surface of it was moving. Little rings out and out the way water moves when a truck goes by. Her hand was shaking that hard. Toby crossed the room. He didn't ask anybody. He walked straight past his grandmother, past his aunt, past the 40 people who had watched me eat alone on the porch 2 hours ago. He wrapped both arms around my waist and pressed his face into my ribs the exact way he had in that footage. I told them, he said muffled. I told Grandma about the smoke lady and the dog. I told them at the hospital. He looked up at me. You never came to see me after. I looked for you. I put my hand on the back of his head. His hair was damp at the temples from the warm room. I'd thought about him every week for a year and never once let myself call the hospital. Because the second you attach your name to a rescue, it stops being the rescue and starts being about you. I had promised myself a long time ago it would never be about me. The room was so quiet I could hear Juno out on the run. I could hear her nails on the concrete as she stood up. I could hear her whine once. She always knows before I do. Eleanor's mouth opened. It worked a moment before anything came out. When it did, her voice had nothing left in it. None of the party. None of the 40 years of running this farm and this family, and everyone in it. Why, she stammered. Why did you never say anything? I opened my mouth to answer her, and Bianca made a sound like something tearing. She put both hands over her face. Through them, so clearly that every person in that room heard it, she said, because I made her stay quiet. The room did not move. 40 people, and not one of them breathed loud enough to hear. Somewhere in the kitchen a faucet dripped, and I counted 3 drops before Bianca lowered her hands. Her mascara had run in 2 thin lines. She was still holding the wine glass she'd toasted me with an hour earlier, and now she set it down on the mantel so hard the stem cracked. She didn't seem to notice. The hospital called the house, she said. Last August. 2 days after the fire. Her voice came out flat, like she was reading a balance sheet. I answered.
They wanted to reach the boy's family.
They said a smoke jumper had pulled him out. They gave a name.
Bianca.
Marcus had come in from the hall. He was standing very still by the doorframe, one hand flat against it. They gave whose name? She looked at me. Not at him. At me.
Yours, she said.
I felt the edge of the porch railing under my palm before I knew I'd reached for it. Outside, past the screen, Juno lifted her head off her paws and watched me through the dark. You knew for a year. Marcus's voice didn't rise. That was the strange part. In 6 years, I had never heard him this quiet with his own family. A whole year, Bianca. Toby was in a burn ward for 11 days and you. I know how long he was in the ward. She turned on him then, and her chin was shaking. I sat there. I signed the forms because you two were away, out of state for Marcus's job. I read the incident report. Do you understand? I read it. The name of the jumper who went in without waiting for her team was right there on the county paper, and I brought it home, and I put it in the drawer under the good silverware, and I never took it out again. A woman near the fireplace pressed a napkin to her mouth. Nobody else moved. Why? Eleanor said. She had sunk into the armchair by the TV. The cake knife was still on the floor where she dropped it. She looked, for the first time in 6 years, like a woman of 70, the powder gone gray in the creases of her face, both hands folded in her lap like she was praying and had forgotten the words.
Bianca laughed.
It was an ugly, wet sound. Because every Thanksgiving you'd hold my hand at the head of the table and tell 40 people your daughter made vice president at 39. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. And then she'd walk in with dirt under her nails and that animal, and I thought, for once, for one holiday, I get to be the one you're proud of. And if I said it out loud, if I told you what she did up on that ridge, I'd never be the one you were proud of again. There it was. The thing I'd heard through the hallway wall back in July, the words I couldn't place. You're not to bring that up again. She hadn't been protecting a secret. She'd been protecting her place at the table. So you made a 12-year-old lie, I said. It was the first thing I'd said since the news anchor's voice went out. Toby was pressed against my side. I could feel him shaking. I told her I wanted to send you a card. His voice cracked on the last word. Aunt Bianca said it would embarrass the family. She said you didn't want anyone to know. She said if I really cared about you, I'd stay quiet. He looked up at me, and his eyes were enormous. I thought you didn't want me to say thank you. I thought that's why you never came. I put my hand on the back of his neck the way I do with Juno when a search goes bad, and she needs to know she did nothing wrong. You didn't do anything, I told him. You hear me? Nothing. Eleanor made a sound in the chair. Not a word. Just air, leaving her. I called her a girl who plays with dogs in the dirt, she said. To no one. To the rug. In front of the Hallorans. In front of Pastor Reyes. Her hands opened and closed. She carried my grandson 2 miles down a burning ridge, and I sat her on the porch to eat off a paper plate. Mother. Marcus took a step toward her. Don't. She held up one hand. She wasn't crying, and somehow that was worse. Don't you comfort me. Not for this. And I want to tell you, I felt something huge in that moment. Triumph. Vindication. 6 years of it, all at once. But standing in that quiet room with Toby's heartbeat going against my ribs, all I felt was tired and a small cold thing I couldn't place, because something in Bianca's story didn't sit flush. The hospital had called the house. The incident report named me. Fine. But the report I'd signed at the station was sealed. Chief Ramirez had promised me that himself, standing in the ash with his hand on my shoulder. No names to the press. No names to the town. So, how had it reached a county paper Bianca could read? I didn't get to finish the thought. My phone lit up against my hip and started to buzz, a hard, insistent double pulse I knew. The ring I'd set for exactly one person and one reason. The ring that in 11 years of jumping had never once meant good news. I pulled it out. The whole room turned toward the light of it in my hand. Ramirez, the screen said. And under it, mobile. I answered. Delphine. His voice was moving fast, low, the way it got on the line when the wind was about to shift. Are you somewhere you can talk? Because that footage that just aired, you need to hear this before anybody else calls you. I stepped off the porch and away from the noise. The phone pressed hard against my ear. Gravel crunched under my boots. Behind me, 40 people were still standing frozen around a birthday cake nobody had cut. I'm outside, I said. Go ahead. Chief Ramirez didn't waste breath. Channel 4 wants you live tonight. On location. They've already got a van heading toward the Whitmore place. Someone tipped them you were there. I looked back at the farmhouse. The kitchen light spilled yellow across the yard where Juno lay flat, chin on her paws, watching me. How do they know where I am? That's not the part that worries me, Delphine. A pause. I heard him close a door on his end. That body cam footage they aired. Somebody pulled it before we could review it. It shows you taking your mask off inside the burn zone to talk the boy out. It shows you crossing the line the incident commander drew. You went in before the all clear. I stopped walking. For 11 years I've jumped fire. 11 years of doing the math on wind and fuel, and the exact second a ridge turns into a wall. I knew what he was going to say before he said it, the way you know a slope is going to slide a half second before it does. They'll open a review, I said. They have to. It's on tape now. Public tape. His voice softened, which was worse. I'll stand behind you. You know I will. But the second this is on the news, it stops being ours to handle quietly. You understand. I understood. I understood better than anyone at that party ever could. This was the thing I'd never said out loud, not to Eleanor, not to Bianca, not even fully to Marcus. I didn't stay quiet about my job, because I was humble. I stayed quiet because a smoke jumper who ends up on the news is usually a smoke jumper who did something that gets picked apart later. The good jumps are the ones nobody sees. The famous ones come with a hearing. 6 years, I let them call me the girl who plays with dogs in the dirt, and part of me had been grateful for the cover. I need to call the union, I said. Tonight. Do that. And Delphine, don't talk to that camera. Not one word until I get someone there. I'm 40 minutes out. I'm coming to you. He hung up. I stood in the dark with a dead phone and the smell of somebody's cigarette drifting from the barn. Through the window, I could see them all still gathered. Eleanor's hand over her mouth, Bianca's mascara gone to smoke. An hour ago, I'd been the one they pitted. Now I was the one who could lose everything, and they'd been handed the excuse to say, I told you so. That girl was always trouble, always reckless, always wrong for our Marcus. Juno got up and pressed her whole weight against my leg. I put my hand on her head and let it stay there. The run beside the barn was empty. She'd slipped her latch to come find me. She always knew before I did. The screen door banged. Toby came flying down the steps 2 at a time, no jacket, sneakers untied. He stopped in front of me, breathing hard, and I saw he'd been crying. Are you in trouble? He said. I heard Aunt Bianca say the word review. I know what that means. Zach's dad got a review at his work, and they fired him. I crouched so we were eye to eye. It's not the same thing, bud. You took your mask off. His chin shook. You took it off so I'd hear you. I remember. You said, look at me, not the fire. You could have kept it on and I wouldn't have listened, and you took it off for me, and now they're going to say you did it wrong. I hadn't known he remembered that. 11 days in a burn unit, and he'd held onto the one detail that could hang me. Hey. I took his face in both hands, gentle, the way I'd studied him under the smoke. You did exactly what you were supposed to. You followed my voice out. That's the whole reason it worked. Nobody's going to change that. But you. I'd do it again. Every part of it. I said it flat and certain, because it was the truest thing I knew, and because a 12-year-old shouldn't carry a grown woman's risk in his chest. Okay. He nodded, not okay, and threw his arms around my neck. Over his shoulder, I saw Marcus standing in the doorway, watching us. He'd heard. All of it. I could tell by the way he was holding the frame like the house might tip. The camera van's headlights swung across the driveway then, 2 hard beams cutting through the dust, and everyone inside turned toward the windows at once. Bianca's voice rose, thin and fast. She was already spinning it, already saying reckless, saying we should have known, saying our family doesn't need this kind of attention. And Eleanor, 70 years old, just kept looking at Toby's arms around my neck like she was seeing her grandson come back from the dead a second time. I stood up. My knees were stiff from the cold. I hadn't decided yet what I'd say to that camera, or whether I'd say anything, and the not knowing sat in my stomach like a stone. That was when Marcus let go of the doorframe. He walked into the middle of the living room, past his mother, past his sister, into the center of all that crystal and candlelight, and he stopped. For 6 years I'd watched this man study the floor. He didn't study it now. That's enough, he said. His voice carried. Let me tell all of you what Delphine has never told you. Marcus didn't look at his mother. He looked at me, and then he looked at the room, and he kept talking. Every winter, she comes home with her hands wrapped in gauze. Last February, she had a burn on her forearm the size of my palm. She told me she caught it on the stove. He shook his head slowly. She didn't catch it on the stove. She pulled a man out of a truck fire on County Road 9 and never filed a report, because filing a report meant an interview, and an interview meant photographs, and photographs meant all of you would find out what she does. Someone set a glass down on the sideboard. The room was so quiet I could hear the ice settle in it. 11 years she's been jumping out of planes into fires people run away from, Marcus said. 6 years married to me. And in 6 years I have watched my mother and my sister call her lazy, call her dirty, seat her on the porch like she was hired help, and I said nothing. I asked her to be patient. I asked her to take it, one more dinner, one more holiday. His voice caught on the last word, and held. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I was just a coward with a nicer word for it. I wanted to tell him to stop. Not because it hurt, because I could see what it cost him, standing there in front of 40 people, dismantling himself. He'd spent his whole life being the son who smoothed things over. He was setting that down on the floor in front of everyone. Across the room, Bianca had gone very still, her wine untouched. She knew. She'd known for a year, and she'd said nothing, and now she was watching the floor. "I'm sorry, Delphine," Marca said. "Not for tonight. For all the nights before it." I didn't move. 6 years I'd waited to hear that. And now that it was here, I only wanted the room to stop staring at him. Headlights swung across the front windows. A car door. Boots on the gravel. I knew that walk before the door even opened. Chief Ramirez came in still wearing his department jacket, phone in one hand, and he didn't wait to be introduced. "Which one of you turned on the news?" he said. Nobody answered. He found me across the room, and something in his shoulders eased. "Delphine, I drove 40 minutes. I talked to Channel 4 in your driveway. They're not running an investigation piece. I made sure of it. Chief, listen to me." He held the phone up like evidence. "I already called a review board myself. The mask came off because the boy was in respiratory arrest and your regulator wouldn't see it on his face. You gave him your air. That's not a safety violation. That's the reason he's breathing." He looked around the silent room, at the cake, at the balloons, at the woman frozen with a ring on her hand. "I don't know what's going on in this house, but that girl you've got sitting wherever you've got her sitting is the finest firefighter I have ever commanded, and I've commanded 300 of them." The reversal I'd been bracing for since his first phone call. The discipline, the review, the thing I'd hidden my whole career to avoid, folded shut in the space of 30 seconds. I felt my knees remember they were holding me up. Then Eleanor moved. She had been standing by the cake table this whole time, one hand flat against the linen. She let go of it. She walked, slowly, her heels loud on the hardwood, then quieter as she crossed onto the pine boards of the porch. The porch. My porch. The place she'd sent me with a paper plate an hour ago, in front of everyone. She stopped where the folding chair still sat crooked from where I'd eaten alone. "I put you out here," she said. Her voice had lost 70 years of certainty. "On my own porch. I called you." She couldn't say it. Her chin trembled. "I called you the girl who plays with dogs in the dirt. And you carried my grandson out of a fire 2 miles from where he was sleeping, and you never once let me thank you." 40 people watched a woman who had never apologized for anything in her life try to do it in front of all of them. "I'm ashamed," Eleanor said. "I want everyone here to hear me say it. I was wrong about her. I was wrong about all of it. I could have let her stand there in it. Part of me, the small part one don't like, wanted to. Instead, I reached down for Juno. She was already at my heel. She'd slipped her latch an hour ago to find me and never once left my side. 60 pounds of shepherd pushing straight into my legs. I went down to one knee and put my arms around her and pressed my face into the dust and smoke smell of her coat, the smell they'd all called dirty. "I never needed the thank you," I said. "Not to Eleanor. To the dog. To the room. To myself. That's not why we go." That was the truth I'd carried for 11 years, and saying it out loud in that house cost me nothing, because it had never been for them. Then a sound cut across the whole quiet room. Small sneakers, fast, slapping the hardwood. Toby hit me at a full run, arms locking around my neck hard enough to knock me sideways into Juno, and he turned his face out toward every single person in that room and said it loud enough that not one of them could pretend they hadn't heard. "She's the reason I'm still here for Grandma's birthday." Nobody moved for a long second. Then I heard it, the smallest, most useless sound in the world. Bianca's heels, crossing the hardwood toward the front door. Not fast. Not slow. Just leaving. She didn't say goodbye to her mother. She didn't say anything to me. The screen door clicked behind her, and through the window I watched her taillights swing out onto County Road 9 and disappear the way she'd come. 40 guests and the accomplished daughter left first. I let her go.
I want to be honest about that.
A year of being called the girl who plays with dogs in the dirt, and the one thing I felt watching her leave was tired. Toby was still holding on to me. I put my hand on the back of his head the way I do with Juno when a jump goes bad, and I felt his shoulders come down an inch. You okay? I asked him. Not the room. Him. You never came to see me, he said again, quieter this time. In the hospital. 11 days he'd been in that burn unit. 2 days after the fire, the hospital had called this house, and this house had answered, and nobody had told me. I know, I said. I should have. That was mine to fix, not yours. Marcus crouched down next to us, right there on the floor in front of everyone, and for the first time in 6 years he didn't check the room before he spoke. I should have driven him myself, he said. I should have driven you both. That was the moment I knew something had actually changed. Not the news, not the apology on the porch. This. My husband on his knees on his mother's floor, not managing anyone. Here's the part people always want and never get. I didn't feel triumphant. I called Juno over, one word low. Juno, here. And she came off her mat by the wall and pressed her whole warm weight against my leg. I put my face down in the fur behind her ears, where she smells like smoke and clean dog no matter how many times I wash her. Somebody in the room actually laughed, soft, at the two of us down there on the floor. It wasn't a cruel laugh. It was the first kind one I'd heard in that house. The weeks after didn't wrap up neat. I want to tell you the truth about that too. Bianca sent a letter. 11 days after the party, I noticed the number, of course I did. Thick paper, her bank's cream stationery, her name embossed at the top like it mattered. I read it twice at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold. I've had a lot of time to reflect, it said, and I hope in time we can move past this as a family. Not once did the words come out plain. Not once did she write. I knew, and I let them treat you like that, and I did it because I couldn't stand you being the good one. I know the difference between an apology that wants to fix something and an apology that wants the discomfort to go away.
This was the second kind.
I put it in the drawer with the warranty cards, and I didn't write back. Some silences you keep for a reason. Eleanor was the surprise. She called me on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't pick up. Delphine, she said, and her voice had lost that flat, county fair smoothness it always had. I've been reading about the fire. The Ridgeline one. A pause. Your Chief Ramirez. And a man named Deacon. And a woman, Priya? Am I saying it right? She was learning their names. My crew's names. She'd written them down. Priya, I said.
Yeah.
That's her. And the dog, Eleanor said. Juno. 6 years old. Search and rescue. She said it carefully, like a woman reciting something she'd studied for. I got that right? You got it right, I said, and I had to set the coffee down. She never made it pretty. She never said sorry again after the porch. She'd said it once, in front of 40 people, and I think she knew a second one would be for her, not me. Instead, she just kept learning things. That's how I knew it was real. The fake kind performs. The real kind does homework. Toby signed up for a wilderness first aid course that fall, 12 years old, youngest in the class, and he called me before the first day to ask if he could bring Juno for moral support. I said the instructor might have opinions about that. He brought her anyway. Here's what I've got after all of it. You don't have to burn anyone down to prove you were worth something. I sat on that porch and ate alone, and I could have set the whole table on fire with one sentence, any day for a year. I didn't need to. The truth doesn't need an audience to be true. Self-respect isn't waiting by the door for applause. It's doing the right thing in the dark, with a dog and no witnesses, and going home.